Welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. It's time for another SPFBO finalist review, and today it's going to be Daughter of the Beast, Book 1 of the Vishivka trilogy by E.C. Greaves, and there will be no spoilers in this review, and I do apologize for my likely terrible pronunciation of Vishivka, but I really did enjoy this read a lot. In terms of the strengths, it had some wonderful humor in it. I really enjoyed E.C. Greaves' humor a lot. There's a lot of whimsy to it, a lot of creativity in this story that really shines. And I also would like to say that he successfully draws from Slavic lore with some really cool creatures in this world like the Volcari and the Kimori and hobgoblins and some really eerie creatures as well that I'm not sure what they're called, but man, there's some really creepy ones in there too. So just lots of imaginative creatures that are really coming from the Slavic sources, and also I suspect a lot from E.C. Greaves' imagination. And there are no humans in this story, which makes it, I think, an interesting one for that reason. I like that. I think that distinguishes this from most fantasy. Yet there are relatable characters, even if they aren't human. It is a coming-of-age story, and it leans toward a tone and a reading level that is overall suited to perhaps a younger teen audience, but also still very much enjoyable for an adult reader. Now, the main character is Zintail, or Zintail. I'm going with Zintail here, but do not call her Zinni, whatever you call her. She is a Kimori whose village is raided by the dreaded Volcari. These are lupine yet anthropomorphic monsters, at least to other people, to other outsiders. They are monsters that are feared for their battle lust and their battle prowess. Among their sisterhood, however, Zintail must forge a new identity and find her purpose in a world that is heading toward a major crisis where it looks increasingly impossible to avoid being crushed in between two imperial powers on a collision course. Now, the characters are really fun. They're a major strong point for this story. I enjoyed getting to know these characters, and I think it's probably among Zintail's raid sisters, her fellow Volcari, that I enjoyed myself the most. There's just something about their rough humor and their camaraderie that I found myself really loving. And that's where I believe Greaves' writing really most shines, where his dialogue is at its best, is in between this small group of Volcari that kind of grow up with our main character, Zintail. And yeah, they have to learn how not only to fight, but to survive as things get really serious. I'd also like to give a shout out to Uya and Oya, the twins. I really enjoyed their dialogue a ton. Probably half the time that I laughed, it was because of those two. But I also really just loved Zintail's two besties in Mazgar and Sarga. There's a wonderful trio there that I became quite attached to, and I found myself feeling very affectionate toward. So well done to E.C. Greaves for that. Speaking of friendship, there are some great themes in this story, including found family, obviously with Zintail finding herself amongst these monsters, but also conflict within her as she struggles between her past self and the self that she is forging in the present. And so there's an interesting question of free will and whether you put yourself on your path or are you forced into it by circumstances and the world around you. So there's some really nice little thematic stuff going on in there as well. In terms of the parts that I felt were a bit weaker, I would point to the narrative structure overall. There are a lot of time jumps in here and sometimes skipping over events that I would have thought would have been important enough to actually put on page, but are skipped over. And I have to wonder if maybe that is the result of, now sometimes these are violent events, and I think maybe E.C. Greaves was trying to keep the tone overall more appropriate for a slightly younger audience. So maybe that's sometimes why some stuff gets skipped over. But overall, I felt like the story is just, it's something that's bigger it wants to be a bit bigger maybe than what was fitting into this maybe slightly younger audience-oriented tone. So there was just a bit of a disconnect there for me, I would say overall. But the fact that this wants to be a bigger story also might have to do with that it is part one of a series, and I'm sure it will go in some very interesting places. There are some beautiful moments despite this nitpicking that I have here with the overall narrative structure. There are some fun, emotional, beautiful moments. But yeah, sometimes I did feel that the plot lacked impetus. And I think that, again, might be in part because of the time jumps. I also would love to see E.C. Greaves have the opportunity maybe to work with a really good developmental editor and probably a copy editor as well. He has this brilliant imagination and I think a good instinct for storytelling, but I think that this is a story that would benefit from that kind of insight. And of course, these things don't come cheap, but yeah, I think that all of us would produce a better story working with a good developmental editor, of course. But it's really in that narrative structure where I feel like a developmental editor can be most helpful. I think he would probably get a lot from that. But that's just my 2 cents there. In terms of the copy editor, yeah, I'm being Mr. Picky English professor guy again here. I would love to sit down with E.C. Greaves and talk about commas. Not many people would enjoy that conversation, but you never know. But these are, again, my little nitpicks in a story that I really did love a lot overall. I just enjoyed my time here. And I do recommend it if you're looking for something along those lines for sure. Now I have to score this. It's my least favorite part of doing all this, frankly, is assigning the score. But for me, a 1 to 2, this is on a scale of 10. 1 to 2 is something that is just, it needs so much work. It's so flawed that it really should not have been published, probably. 3 to 4 is something that is also fairly flawed, but I can see some really redeeming qualities in it. And I feel like it could be worked up into a great story. And for me, a 5 to 6 is something that I really enjoyed. I thought was very good. And a 7 to 8 is something that actually really impressed me and feel like, wow, this is really quite outstanding. And then a 9 to 10 for me is a all-time favorite. It is something that will join my very favorite books that I've ever read. So I'm being pretty stingy here with my scoring. And nevertheless, The Daughter of the Beast is a 7 for me, which means that it impressed me and I thought it was really quite a great storytelling feat on the part of E.C. Greaves. So congratulations to him, and yeah, I really enjoyed this one, guys. But that is it for me for now. Until next time.